So before we do any brazing on an actual air conditioner or heat pump, we're going to do a lot of table work. And so I have a piece of 3/8 copper and a table vise. Yours may look different than the one I have here, but we want to get a piece of copper, put it in a vise where it's going to hold it steady for us. So most of what we're going to be doing is a horizontal braze. That's going to be most like what you're working on out in the field when you're working on an air conditioner. But we should never try to do anything out in the field until we have done a lot of table work. So that's what we're going to be working on here. The first thing that I'm going to do is make sure that my work area is safe and that there's nothing that's going to be a combustible. So just make sure I've got a good, clean, safe work area. My torches are a good 5 foot away from me. I've got my fire extinguisher still back here handy and no trip hazards. And so I think we are good to get started. One of the most important skills when brazing is the ability to control your heat. That's getting it hot enough to where you can bring the copper up to brazing temperature in a reasonable amount of time, but not too hot to where you're constantly fighting it and worrying about whether you're going to melt your copper. And so with 3/8 especially, 3/8 will heat quickly, and but it's also very easy to overheat 3/8. And so to prevent that, the first thing that I've done is I've gone to my regulators and I've taken my oxygen acetylene both down. That basically lowers that ceiling on how hot our torch can get. So right now I've dropped that down to about 2.5 on my acetylene and only about 5 or 6 on my oxygen. And so let's light up and see what things look like. So that's pretty weak right there. So I'm going to see if we can get that a little stronger. That's not bad right there. A little more. Okay. So my rule of thumb is that you should be able to bring your copper up to brazing temperature within about 7 to 10 seconds. If you're going much faster than that, then you've got too much heat and you want to back that down. If it's much longer than that, then you need more. So what I'm going to look for you to be able to do in your skills test is whether or not you're going to be able to bring your copper up to brazing temperature and hold it there. So brazing temperature is to take the copper to a cherry red, and we want to be able to keep it there without melting it. So right now what I'm doing is you can see I've got my torch pulled a pretty good ways away from the copper, because once it came up to temperature, if I would have stayed on the copper too close, it would have just melted a hole in it. So I'm able to control my temperature, control my heat by pulling away from the copper, and I'm able to keep that at a nice brazing temperature without melting it. So I'll show you what would happen if we stayed in one spot too long. Let's say we bring it around here and we keep our heat there. Boom, we just made a hole in our copper. Very easy to do. So I was still a little bit too hot there. We will make some adjustments, get that temperature down, and see if we can keep it at temperature without having to work the distance away from the copper the way we just did. So a good method and a good way to practice controlling your heat is to start small. Start with a cool flame and see how well that heats your copper. If it's taking more than 7 to 10 seconds to heat up your copper, then you need more heat. So we'll start this time with a really small flame, see how that does, and then we'll make adjustments as necessary. So. Starting with a pretty cool flame right here. Even there, I was able to come up to temperature pretty quick. I'm going to let that cool off, and I'm going to back this down. So I'm going to start by shutting off my oxygen to lengthen that inner cone. I'm going to shut down my acetylene even a little bit more. That is much more controllable. Much less chance of overheating and melting my copper. And so more flame is not, more heat is not necessarily better. A lot of times the best is less heat, less flame. And so I'm just keeping this up at a cherry red. So at any point there, that entire piece of copper is ready to take a brazing rod once we get to that point.